And so recording is in progress, and we will go on that way. So welcome everybody. The idea is to have a discussion on a topic which was not yet discussed in the RDA. This is why we have a BoF, a Birds of a Feather session. And the point to have a discussion about evaluation of research is that it's a very, very hot topic, maybe more in some parts of the world than in others. And so I will show you a few slides which are just to open the discussion, the session, and then we will go on with the rest of the session. So welcome to all. My name is Françoise Genova. I am one of the organizers of this meeting, and there are several others who are here around. I will show, I have to open, no, it's not that one. Sorry, I have sparse resources on my computer when there is a projection like this. So let's go to share the introduction. Okay, so the point is to talk about evaluation and research. So I think I have not seen Shelley, but the other people who co-organized this session with me are around. Aria Smith, sorry for the S, which is too much, and Natalie, and I put an H at Natalie, sorry, Rosie, Rebecca, and Shelley have helped to organize this BoF. There are two shared documents. One is the collaborative notes of a meeting. So I told you, if you are in WOVA, you can find the link to the meeting page. And in the meeting page, you have a link to the notes. And if you can click in the chat of the meeting, you can also find the link to the collaborative note. There is another document which is linked from the collaborative notes, which is here to gather information about evaluation. So we called it Stories and Link, and you are very welcome to add information in it. I saw that Neil, who is here, added lots of useful information, and feel free to add information while we talk, I mean, or after the meeting, but you can begin now. So why we do this? It's because it's a hot topic, and it's also because we know that there is a need to change the way research is evaluated if we want open science to succeed. So data is one of the key components of open science, of course, with publications and software. And since RDA is here to tackle subjects linked to open data and sharing data in general, we thought it was really useful to discuss the topic in the RDA, just to check possible RDA roles in the evolution of research evaluation. So the objectives of this meeting are first, of course, to hold a first discussion in the RDA about this subject. And so we will hear a few talks about providing different points of view. Then we have to understand whether there is an interest in the RDA community to develop activities in the domain. And if there is an interest, to identify which activities could be tackled by the RDA in the domain. So this is the second part of the meeting. The first part of the meeting will be to have short talks from different stakeholders' point of view. Then a short talk also about the outcome of a global questionnaire survey of scholarly communication attitudes and behavior of early career researchers, which was a global global survey, and then time for discussion. So I think here it's over for the moment. And so it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. So feel free also to write things in the meeting notes if you wish. Don't hesitate to add information if you wish, and also to add information in the stories and link document. So the first speaker is Javier Lopez Al-Bachette, who is a physicist. He is currently on leave from the Universidad de Granada, now working at the Open Science Unit of the European Commission. So the talk is to briefly describe the processes which are ongoing, facilitated by the European Commission to reach an agreement on the reform of the research assessment system. So the starting point is European, but I think the view is going towards global. So Javier will explain us that. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, François, for the introduction. I will try to share my slides. Okay, let me go. Can you see them?
It works. Go on.
Okay, fine. Okay, as I said, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm representing the European Commission, and the goal in this brief talk is to briefly present to all of you the ongoing process that we are facilitating from the Commission to reform the research assessment system. Okay, of course, one needs to start by the motivation why change is needed, and there are many different reasons. This is not a new topic. We are building on many previous initiatives and discussions. Let me summarize it maybe in 3 points. One of them is that the research process is actually changing. It's moving toward a digital transition. It is a lot more data intensive. It requires more collaboration because the topics are more complex and cross-disciplinary. And that is a reality. So we think that the current system, which is used to evaluate research and researchers, is not very adequate to this reality. One of the main reasons, and that is well known, I guess, also to all of you, is that often, not always, but very often, the assessment practices are too focused on publications only. So how many publications you have, and especially what is the venue for that publication, many times reflected in the use of journal impact factors to evaluate research. And of course, this is a practice that is very extended. It provides a very narrow measure of quality, and often wrong measure of quality, and it blocks collaboration. It does not reward the sharing. And that is actually one of the core problems and core things that we would like to change. So from those two observations, of course, this is a topic that you can extend, talk a lot about it, and many people approach it from different angles. I understand that the main scope of this session is from the open science angle, but there are others. But this gives the motivation for a reform to increase efficiency, namely speed, scientific discovery and progress, impact, and social responsibility of research. Of course, this is a difficult task because it requires a cultural change to change how the communities perceive themselves, research communities, and evaluate themselves. And also, of course, the involvement of institutions and funders. Okay, this is a very simplified and short introduction. This is a topic that can be discussed at length. But so what are the objectives of this reform? Well, first of all, let me highlight that it is of broad scope in the sense that we are aiming at changing the assessment of both research proposals, researchers for hiring or promotion, research units, and research institutions. And as said, the goals are to increase the quality, the performance, and the impact of the research. So what are the directions guiding this reform? Well, we would like to see a research assessment system that puts the focus on quality and promotes qualitative judgment with peer review, also allowing the use of quantitative indicators, but used in a more responsible way. What that does mean, we can discuss maybe later. Also, a very important aspect of the reform should be that it should consider the diversity of research outputs beyond just publications, as said. So there are many other things that researchers produce in the research cycle, like this is just an example, data sets, software, protocols, patents, etc., that we feel or we know for a fact that they are not properly rewarded in current practices. Another of the main lines of the reform or objectives is to reward the diversity of tasks and roles of researchers beyond just publications. Again, so researchers do many different things concerning the data. There is data curation, data management, but many other things like peer review, mentoring and supervision, leadership, communication, engagement with citizens or with policymakers, etc. So all these other activities that should be properly acknowledged and recognized in the new system, we believe. And of course, all the above would serve to support team science and to incentivize open collaboration or open science practices like early knowledge and data sharing. So in a nutshell, these are the main objectives of the reform. So now I will focus a little bit more on the process that we are following from now on. Let me say that all the work from the Commission side started at the beginning of 2021. What we did is spend most of the year consulting stakeholders, so researchers, research organizations, funders, policymakers, etc., to try to identify a set of common objectives, principles, and a possible way forward for this reform. So this was a very intensive consultation and a co-creation exercise, the result of which is published in this scoping report that was published in November 2021. And that I invite you to read it because it summarizes very, very long and in-depth discussions with the community. Now, taking it from here, what we did at the beginning of the year is to launch a call of interest for any organization involved in assessment of research to join in a process that we conceive it. And when we say we the Commission, I have to clarify, we are facilitating the process, but this has been conceived from the beginning as a co-creation exercise with all the stakeholders. That is articulated basically in two steps. First step is to reach an agreement on principles, commitments, and for guiding the changes, and a timeline. So we are moving from general principles to more concrete actions as reflected in concrete commitments and a given timeline for implementation. And about the agreement, we have been drafting since the beginning of the year. We have consulted with all interested organizations and we are converging, and we're optimistic to have a very final version of it soon. But of course, it will need to be validated by the community before we can call it final. And then, okay, this would be a document, an agreement with these elements that the interested organizations will sign on it. There will be a rolling out of signatures, but this is only the beginning, because afterwards the intention is to create a coalition where actually the signatories get together, take joint ownership, and work in the development and in the implementation of this commitment and changes. And the tentative date for the setting up of this coalition is sometime in the fall this year. That is what we would like to do. Some of you based in Europe, I'm not going to discuss the policy context, but those of you based in Europe know it reasonably well from what I know. But I would like to highlight that all this has a very strong political support in several ways. And that, again, I want to stress that with the Commission here, we are acting as a facilitator. Also, another thing I would like concerning the role of the Commission, I think it's very important to highlight another aspect of this reform movement, is that one of its guiding principles is to respect the autonomy of all the involved organizations. So it's not top-down and it's not prescriptive, which I think it's also important to highlight. Like I said, we publish a call for interest, and there is a very good response to this. As of today, over 330 organizations have replied positively to this call for interest. And just to give you a feeling of who is getting on board, what is the community behind, so we have over 120 universities, also many universities associations and alliances, We have over 40 research centers and institutes, including research infrastructures, funders, public and private, funders associations, also national evaluation agencies, ministries and authorities to a lesser extent, because there is another, probably a better channel for them to get involved, but they are also welcome. Learned societies, reproducibility networks, and a variety of other organizations which are not easy to classify on research management, consultancy, etc. And let me stress also that this call remains open for everyone that is interested and wants to join the process with no commitments. So this is a little bit the community that is working together. Now we have a draft agreement, as I said, that we are getting close to a final version. We hope. Again, this needs to be validated by these partners in this path. And okay, just what's in this draft agreement? Well, there is a common set of principles that underpin the reform, and these are taken directly from the scoping report, from the consultation. What is really new is the commitments for change and the timeline for the implementation. And here, maybe it's important because, of course, as I said, we are building from previous initiatives like DORA or Lady Manifesto, etc. What is probably different here and what we are trying to do is that we are trying to really call for action, not just to endorse a set of principles, but to get to push for their implementations. And then it also includes some elements or main principles about how to operate and organize the coalition, together with some other materials. Although this isn't draft version yet, but let me show what are the main 4 core commitments in the last draft of this agreement. First of all is to recognize the diversity of contributions to and careers in research according to the need and the nature of the research. The second commitment is to base research assessment primarily on qualitative evaluation with peer review, supported by responsible use of indicators. The third one is abandon inappropriate uses in research assessment of journal and publication-based metrics. And the fourth one is to avoid the use of international rankings of research organizations in research assessment. Okay, this is only the highlights. The core commitments look actually longer in the real text. And finally, this is my last slide. With this, I will finish. Let me highlight that even if it is initiated as an European initiative, because, okay, probably because you have to start somewhere, it has a clear global scope, among others, because I believe that most of the issues that we are trying to tackle, they are not particular to Europe, but they happen actually all around the globe. And it's also important that we engage global partners, first of all, to avoid creating incompatibilities in between the different assessment frameworks, and also to facilitate mobility and scientific exchange, so not to create silos. I mean, the scientific community operates globally, we all know that, so we should keep that. Second, it's about the global scope. We believe that this reform provides very strong support for further uptake of open science practices. Let me remark that several international or non-Europe-based organizations have already joined this coalition of the willing, so to say. So let me highlight, it's open to everyone, even if it started in Europe. And about the coalition, the way we think about it is, well, one of its aspects is that it will cooperate with like-minded initiatives and organizations worldwide. Just to mention 2, DORA or RDA would be natural partners to discuss and get engaged with, and that we are already pushing for holding discussions with other global partners in global fora, like the Global Research Council, UNESCO. We are attending every available fora internationally to present this and to get others engaged as well. And let me finish with a word of acknowledgement, because the preliminary governance model, even if it is under discussion yet, but it is largely inspired by those of RDA. The way we see at this coalition, although the members will decide, because I insist they will take the ownership, but the way we see it is that it should be community-driven, as inclusive as possible, work-oriented, and light on bureaucracy and reporting, so that it is really a place of where people, organizations get together, share experiences, mutual learning, and do work and advance together. And that's it from my side. Sorry if I took over 10 minutes. I'm not sure.
Thank you very much, Javier. It was also a general introduction to the subject, so the beginning was quite a good introduction to what we have to think about. Just something which was exchanged in the chat. The idea was that if you have questions to the speakers, please write them in the chat, and we will ask the speakers to answer the questions in the chat if it's possible. And Natalie is checking things so that if there is a topic which has to be addressed during the discussion, you online, I mean, she will raise it afterwards. But if you have questions, write them in the chat, and we ask the speakers to answer the questions in the chat when it's possible. Thank you very much, Javier. Serge, after having the general point of view and the global point of view of the European Commission, as you insisted on the fact that implementation is a key, the idea was to have an example of implementation in a relatively large and diverse research organization, which is the French National Center of Scientific Research, the CNRS. So Serge Boin, during his career, he has done many things, but among other things, he switched from the development of analytical tools to visualize the content of scientific text corpora, to defining indicators for research policies at the CNRS, including bibliometrics to research assessment. And now he is moving to looking at research assessment in general and how to make it evolve. So he's currently working at the Directorate of Open Science at the CNRS. Serge, you can go on.
Can you hear me?
Oui, tout va bien.
Trying to share. Does it work?
Oui, il faut que tu passes en diaporama.
Okay. Come on. Ah. C'est bon là?
Oui, c'est bon.
Okay. Well, I didn't develop indicators for assessment at all. It was precisely the fact that the indicators have been used for assessment started in the 80s and 90s, which has made me fall into the idea that we should do something against this. It was for political, the indicators for research policy, actually. I would like to make a couple of comments on the excellent talk by Javier. I don't think that today's evaluation system is not fit. I think it is toxic, in fact. And this is my personal view. I don't think there is any possibility to have responsible use of indicators for assessment in general, because as soon as you depend, even if it's only partly, if your personal assessment depends on some indicators, you will switch from what you're supposed to do to actually maximize the indicator, whatever it is. So this is just two small things I wanted to add. So the CNRS, what is the CNRS? The CNRS is a very, very large organization and of basic research. It encompasses all possible disciplines from a basic point of view all the time, even, of course, if there are many connections with innovation and development. More than 10,000 permanent researchers, which are into working in more than 1,000 labs, most of them being, and this is very important, actually joint initiatives with universities or other higher education organizations or research organizations. And I said it over France and beyond, and even sometimes with companies. This means that there are actually in the labs more than 30,000 permanent researchers from all sorts of organizations, but the CNRS is responsible only for 10,000, if I can say so, only 10,000, which makes a number of evaluation, which is quite high, you can imagine. 4 years ago, it did sign DORA. So the question is, you signed DORA and so what? So I've been actually reappointed at the CNRS precisely about that. Do something now that we have signed DORA, it should be implemented in a way. So after an enormous number of discussion, negotiations and things, there are 4 basic principles which have been introduced and now which are supposed to be taken into account in any assessment. So I will not go into the details. It is, of course, the same things as has said Javier. It is so commonplace now that there is explicitly the fact that the data we are in RDA here should be taken into account, where, of course, this means something. I forgot to say that the fact that we have all disciplines, possible disciplines, brings in the argument that there are so many different ways to do assessment depending on the disciplines. The answer, yes, probably, that's true, but there are some common and basic things which are here recalled on this page. So how does the assessment system works within the CNRS? It's called the Comité National. There are 41 sections which are more or less disciplinary, 5 interdisciplinary commissions. All those things are in a way grouped together in 10 scientific councils, which are large disciplines like physics, social science and humanities, life sciences, environment sciences, or whatever. And this 41 plus 5 plus 10 plus 1 makes a group of more than 1,000 people, which are in all those small groups, all those groups there, who are in charge of doing the evaluation, performing the evaluation. But this body is by decree independent from the CNRS, and it does insist on its independence, which makes it a bit difficult for the CNRS to say, you should do that for the evaluation. We need to convince them, because each section or commission defines and publishes, that's important, it's always been the case, its own criteria, which makes, as there are a number of procedures, if you see that there are 46 commissions and sections, if you take the smallest possible number of procedures is 4, and there are, of course, 164 sets of criteria, which is a nightmare, believe me. And the good news, this is since last year, there is a new interdisciplinary commission called Science and Data, Triumph. So I will finish this. It is very simple. The idea is simple. It shows it is very complicated. There is a research policy. The chief executive officer of the CNRS and all research directorates, including mine, of course, says we must change the evaluation system, which means that we have to convince everybody in the Comité National and to reconvince, of course, because they change. But this means that people who are in charge to manage the files are people from the Human Resources Department. And this is done using IT tools, of course, which are developed by the people from the IT. And if you go into the details, you will see it is very important. For example, if I go back here, if you take the item 2, we say a complete list of productions is unnecessary, which is, so to say, a euphemism. It is toxic because the full and complete list of productions is an incentive to count them, which is the first indicator. So if you go back here, and if you have a look at the IT crowd, they have put somewhere a small window where you can upload the list of all your production. So we've got to tell them, no, please remove this. And then, of course, it's this type of detail is very important. But also, we are embedded in all French higher education and research organizations. And of course, we cannot go anywhere if we don't cooperate with them. And most of all, the very simple thing which has been said by Javier, it cannot be done within the CNRS alone. It is indeed a systemic issue. And this is where I finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. This gives what happens in a specific organization, but maybe you will recognize things which happen in your own organization here and there. So please, if you have questions to Serge, can you write them in the chat? And we will move to the next talk. The next talk is Carlos Montero Corrales. Carlos, are you around? Yes. So Carlos is a public administrator and he works as an academic assessor in the research directory of the National University of Costa Rica. He's developing the evaluation and planning research university agenda. He has done public policy evaluation for 5 years in general, and also research evaluation, research plans in the fields of public administration, engineering, agriculture, and veterinary medicine. So now we have two complementary talks coming from Costa Rica. Go on, Carlos.
Okay, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well, and we see your slides.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I will present three challenges in evidence-based science evaluation, and I will focus in the case of veterinary medicine school. Well, the first challenge that we have in this research evaluation process is going out to the street light effect, from traditional metrics to alternative metrics to measure social results. So as you can see, imagine when we are evaluating research outputs or benefits, normally we are focusing in the bibliometry techniques, but obviously there are another kind of techniques that we can use to catch or evidence the results that have science in society or in general. For example, potentiometry, all metrics, even though using social science techniques to know how society or vulnerable population use and benefit and improve their capacities with the science that we make. In this evaluation, we have some indicators in the traditional way, in the street light effect, by using bibliometric techniques. For example, 520 scientific productions as articles, congress papers, and book chapters between 2010 and 2020 were achieved by the 5 programs that we evaluate in the veterinary medicine school. But there are another results that show us the benefits in the community, in the research community that the veterinary school make. For example, more than 150 theses were supervised by the researchers of the evaluated programs. But how we go out of the street light to the out of the street light effect, we use potentiometry, for example, to evidence that 17 scientific articles were cited in 27 patents registered in the World International Property Patents Organization. That 17 scientific articles were published by the 5 programs that we evaluate in the veterinary medicine schools. And 9 scientific articles were cited in 10 policy documents, including United Nations documents. So that technique gives us some indicator out of the street light effect that give us alternative indicators to make a value in judgment of the effects. Another, we use all metrics that show us the numbers and where they are and what are the professional profiles of the readers in Mendeley, of the articles of the veterinary medicine schools. More than 6,900 readers in Mendeley have downloaded in their computers, in their Mendeley software, at least one article of the veterinary medicine schools. And obviously we use social science techniques to get things that, for example, that the students increase their own research capacities, making their thesis in the 5 programs evaluate. And 2, all the evaluate programs need to develop strategies to implement open science efforts. So this one was the first challenge. The second challenge that we have was from the dispersion of academic production data to the integration of data to generate evidence in research. That was a huge challenge, and we made 3 efforts to meet the challenge. The first one was to build a unified database from different sources. That's an open science challenge. We get institutional academic system data to catch different kind of products of academic field. Then we triangulate that database to Scopus Elsevier results that normally give us publications of articles and Congress papers. Then we triangulate that with the research resumes, and finally we triangulate with the university repository. So that gives us like a 95% database of quality that give us different products and different results of science in the veterinary medicine schools. Another was to get training of science evaluation techniques for how to do bibliometric, almetric, and social network analytics. And to contract professionals to do these kinds of analysis, taking into account statistical knowledge. Well, this graphic shows us the trajectory of the scientific production of the evaluate
We don't have
programs.
any graphics. I think it's stalled, but you please go on because
I'm sorry?
we don't have much time. So,
Okay.
do you want to share it?
Right now?
Okay, now we see it. Yes.
No? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. For example, we build this graphic taking into account different sources to have all the whole back production of the 5 program. Each line shows us the research production from 1979 to 2020. And we focus our evaluation in the last 10 years from 2010 to 2020. And another lines, you can see all 5 program evaluate that we include in our process. So this graphic is don't show the work that this graphic have in the backside. We spent like 3 months building a database with approximately 15 columns and 779 observations of the results of the veterinary medicine school. So with that kind of database, we go to the third challenge from traditional graphics to data visualization to make decisions process. In this way, we think that we need to know if there are 5 islands doing research in the veterinary medicine school, or that islands have bridges into programs. So this network show us that the nodes are the people who are researching, and the edge shows the co-authorship relationship between one person to another person. The reality in this school is that this program, P8, is the biggest program of the veterinary medicine school. Don't make research alone. The P8 make research with others programs into the same school. And for example, with other MedPop, that is another program that we evaluate, Piera, that is another program that we evaluate, UPA también, and this one that are not a program that we evaluate. So alternative graphic show us things to take decision makings. For example, this graphic show us the distribution of the scientific productions by research line. It's not traditional bibliometrics. For example, the number of scientific articles, but it is like alternative bibliometric because we distribute all the scientific productions in research line. How we get the research line? We build each research line with the teams, with the research teams. And then we distribute all the database that I told you in each research line to know what? To know what is the best research line in the school and what are the efforts that the veterinary medicine school have made to have, for example, this research line with this kind of productions. And even though we can see what is the distribution of the scientific production type, so we can see if in this line we have more articles, we can, or more database produces, or more thesis. So that make sense to make decisions after do this graphic. And even though we can see what are the research lines that don't have a lot of investment in the school, or research lines that are growing up in the last 3 years.
Sorry, Carlos, I think if go on to the conclusions. If there are people who want to know more about what you have done, I suggest that you organize a meeting point in WOVA, so people will have all the details and you can discuss. So go on with the conclusions. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I have 3 conclusions. Research evaluation is an alternative way to learn how we make science according to the results in society. Control, that is the other way. The process is the way to know about the management of the research programs. Research evaluation challenges evaluators to seek data evidence out of the street light to cover different beneficiaries of science. And research evaluation requires high data scientist capacities to create evidence from different sources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if you have questions to Carlos now, please write them in the chat. And again, if there are people interested in hearing more about the tools, I think and the interpretation of the results, I think it's always possible to organize a meeting point in the powerful WOVA interface. So there is lots of discussion in the chat. Natalie will summarize things in the end. So Stephanie, are you around to try to?
I shall try.
Yes, so the next talk is a complementary talk from Costa Rica, from Carlos Monge Hernandez, who is a political scientist. He works in the Vice Rectory of Research and Central American and Toxic Substances Research Institute of the National University of Costa Rica, on the evaluation and planning research university agenda and the promotion of scientific evidence-based policies. So he has a recorded talk because the time of the day is not good in Costa Rica, as for some of you, and for Carlos
Yeah.
Eva, same. So go on, Stephanie, we cross fingers that it works.
Let me know if the sound doesn't come through.
Yes, I will tell
It
you.
is a great honor to be able to address these brief reflections on the future of evaluation in science from my context of a Latin American public university. I'm going to present some challenge of the new scientific evaluation in a world that wants to make the leap to open science. That is, as something that has been promoted in Latin American since the Cordoba Reform more than a century ago, with the generation of relevant knowledge for our countries, realities, and communities. To begin, I would like to rescue this part of the text of the UNESCO recommendation for open science, where explicit reference in the concept of the open science and evaluation as a possibility, but also evaluation is mentioned in this recommendation in the relation with the values of quality, integrity, technological infrastructure, production, and the diversification of forms of incentivities, from recognition of scientific contribution to society and through the innovation of evaluation methodologies and monitoring. That is, there is a possibility of moving from evaluation of science to evaluation that rethink the way of assessing of traditional objects of science evaluation, such production, citation, competitive forms, accreditation and rankings, and personal incentivities, with assessment of scientific culture, division of personal and group trajectories, new alternative and responsive metrics, open reviews, and other forms of fomenting scientific activity. For this, and from my point of view, it's necessary to make the leap from evaluation of science as we conceive it, full of indicators and index, but with little to say about our interaction and contribution to development of social welfare and environmental sustainability. And for this, we can observe how the world of socioeconomic evaluation has grown in these last decades to transform itself to be a contribute to a better programming, to a better planification, to reflect about our forms of action, as well to recognize the public value and become of the process of learning rather than the control, to estrange our way of doing science. The different schools of evaluation show how little by little we have been moving away from exclusively quantitative measurement to turn evaluation into a form of research itself, which seeks to combine different mixed tools and contribute to transformative process. In this sense, we have the first challenge, and one of the most important, which is the diversity of objects to evaluate, to visualize the various forms of production and their degrees of openness, the generation of new responsive metrics that help us to respond to the major problems of science, such as the understanding of the social impact of the scientific activity. This is make it necessary to recognize the multi-level work and inter and transdisciplinarity and cross to institution of organization of society, to also contribute to new forms of social innovation and construct public-owned knowledge. For this, it is possible to make use of tools of different areas of knowledge, such as social science, humanities, data science, and allometrics, and new forms of innovation, guided more with the vision of public value, to sit down also the contribution to political decision, as well as resignify the value of the teamwork. Within this, I would like to highlight as the challenge itself the measurement of the social change. For this, it's first necessary to recognize the different types of extra academic impacts, and these go to many sectors and topics. Inside coexist different forms of work and development of lines of research in favor of the environment, health, and many other areas of society that compose our development. In this sense, rescuing that classic function of evaluation as planning informant, as planification informant, is possible to make the leap to an evaluation for the learning of scientific activity in all the aspects that the world with open science implies, understanding the scientific phenomenon as the relationship of different people, institutions, countries, actions that guide our work in search of generation substantive contribution to society. Which brings us to the last challenge, the governance of science, that needs a new forms of policy science, knowledge management, planning results, capture the knowledge that needs society, and recognizing scientific work in new terms, such as the contribution to the global development goals and reduction of all inequalities, and in this, in terms of multi-level and global governance, recognizing our own gaps, our own geopolitical gaps, to seek the fair world with the lead of science. Thanks. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. So I think that this introduces well the last talk, which is from Sherifa Boukassem Zegmouri, who is full professor of Information and Communication Sciences at Claude Bernard University, which is Lyon 1. And her research is based on the theoretical framework of cultural and creative industries, and it addresses mutations of scholarly communication to open and collaborative models. So she will tell us a few words about a global survey of early career scientists and their attitudes about these kind of topics. And I think that she will help us to open the discussion about what RDA can do in this frame. Sherifa, you can go on.
Hi, everyone. So I will share the screen first, if you don't mind. And here it is.
No, okay, ça va aller.
Okay. Is it okay? Do you see the screen?
C'est bon, problem.
So first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this session. I'm very happy to be part of the debate and to contribute to this discussion. Thank you, Françoise, for involving me in this. Very quickly, I would like to see some words about the study from where I'm talking about. It is the Harbinger Project, a very longitudinal study from 2016 to 2022, where we built a kind of observatory. We have been able to follow more than 160 early career researchers from 8 countries: France, Spain, UK, United States, Poland, Russia, Malaysia, and China, with semi-directed interviews funded on 23 themes explored for 6 years, and collecting data also from their CV and social media accounts. And these ECR were from STM field and social science. Just for the record, we just have finished the very last session of interviews, and we are just analyzing the very last data of our interviews. This observatory was a very first opportunity to see how the trajectory of our early career researchers are able to provide insights on some mutation in the scholarly communication system. And here we are. And what I have been able to analyze from my data, and more precisely relating to this session, and on the role of research assessment for research data, and what could be the role of RDA Alliance, is about two profiles and many perspectives. And the very first profile is a profile that you may already heard about. It's a profile that you may know, is the profile of these early career researchers who are doing a lot on their data, collecting data, analyzing data, but are lacking terminology, lacking cultures of all this framework of data sharing, all this framework of data culture, and without doing this, without really knowing that they are contributing to open science. They do their work of collecting, analyzing data, but they don't link it to open science practices. And this is about what we call a tacit knowledge dilemma. This is maybe can be explained about from the perspective of the fact they are completely focused, and their work is completely focused on results and results only. And what I mean by that is publications. They are aware that their career, the possibility they have to enter the system, is linked completely to the publication they are able to provide in their CV. Meanwhile, they are also aware of the fact that they are not doing enough on their data and on their data sets. And this is why during the interviews, they speak a lot. They provide many elements on how they are afraid of not doing a qualitative work, enough qualitative work on their data sets, and fearing retraction and replication crisis. And here where Research Data Alliance can provide help and insight to this profile of researchers, because they lack culture and skills, they lack training, they don't know that the work they do daily in their lab is very often embedded in framework like fairness and curation. They don't have specific discipline guidance, and this is really problematic. Sometimes they even find out about data management plans, standards, and permanent identifiers. And all these frames are not well known from this profile. And this is really something that could work as a leverage for this profile, profile of early career researchers. The second profile of researchers we have been linked to are those who could really play a role of ambassadors of what could be done in the right way for research, research assessment. These profile of researchers are those maybe who are the most aware of how the system works currently, how the system is changing, how the transition is working, and how research assessment is now at the bridge of something. Maybe something I need to add is the fact that these early career researchers are those who are currently in the most stable position, not tenured, but the most stable position. They are playing the recognition game, as one of them stated, And they are convinced and engaged in giving up on the publication, not stopping publishing papers, of course, but they are really willing in making the work they have to do on their data as important as their publication. And what they want to do, and what they are already engaged in, is making their data sets shared and more visible, and making this work more visible to their scientific community. And here, they want to build new kind of distinction. They want to show that they are researchers able to publish results, of course, but also to show that they are also able to share useful data, as they say, reused data sets, as they say, and to contribute to the open science era and make their data useful for their colleagues and for their community. These early career researchers, this profile, are very engaged in interdisciplinarity. And for these category of early career researcher, whatever their discipline and their age, are very aware of how they could play the game. And this is what they say. And here we can see many roles for RDA, and one of them is to enhance their practices, for instance, for tools and software and infrastructures. Here, I can also see a big role in the fact of showing how data sets can be cited and published, because many of these early career researchers are interested in publishing their data sets. Data papers are very important for this profile of researchers, and they are craving really for debate and for the scientific discussion on what data could be in the open science era. So they are craving for seminar, for summer schools, conference, for community building. And after these 2 years of very tough period of pandemic, they are even more engaged in and willing to meet other colleagues as involved in them. Another topic that seems to me very important is about data conservation, because what the interviews had provided us for elements is the fact that they are very engaged in what they are doing actively, but they are not always projecting themselves in the future. Even they use a data management plan, the conservation issue is not always an issue for them. It is not always, and they are not always able to think about with the right concept, infrastructure, tools, methodology, and even framework. And this is how they can contribute. This is how they can be helped too. And maybe these are the most representative part of the early career researcher profile that can be interest of. And thank you.
Thank you, Sherifa. So if you have questions to Sherifa, there is a link to the Harbingers survey in the stories and links, and also I think in the notes. So thank you very much, Sherifa. I think you can stop sharing. Otherwise, thank you. Thank you very much. So I think that this opens the floor to the discussion about the RDA role. And Natalie, since you are checking the chat, I have the impression that there is a conclusion already about the discussion about the RDA. The talks have pushed people to go on. And can you summarize?
Sure. I mean, I don't know that we concluded exactly what we want to do in RDA, but there seems to be a conclusion. We want to put together something in RDA, whether that's an interest group or a working group. But there's a value of that, because if you have that concrete group, then you can bring the perspective of the group to, say, the coalition that is forming, and have a dialogue and perhaps even help to shape the way that the coalition is put together. So, you know, there are definitions in RDA about whether a working group or interest group is better, depending on what you're doing, and we can discuss that. But there was also one other discussion in the chat, which I'll summarize. You know, it started with Rosie saying, it's great to see that we're discussing a move to qualitative research evaluation. This was in response to Javier's presentation. But we also need to get reviewers to understand that data is a first-class output. So that is, in a sense, a kind of deeper cultural change. And then there was a discussion to not forget about other kinds of research outputs like research software, which is really key. And Neil was saying that they actually created criteria for the REF, which is that big horrible thing that the UK puts all their researchers through every 7 years. But there's still some issues because researchers feel concerned that the processes in place for evaluating that kind of output, they're still not known in the way the processes are known for papers. So I guess the point coming out of that is that the cultural change has to come from different angles. We need to train reviewers and communicate about it. We do need to create new criteria, but there's a larger cultural shift to happen. And one of Neil's conclusions as well is that even the criterion that they put together was going into an existing framework. And so perhaps we even need to shift the framework. So that discussion ended on a radical note, I'll have to say.
Yes.
That's my summary.
Thank you very much. I think that it says, if I can say something about the discussion about do we want an interest group or a working group with an RDA hat firmly on my head, I have a feeling at this stage we are here to begin the discussion on a topic, and this is more the work of an interest group. And I saw somewhere in the chat that someone was saying create an interest group and then see if we want which working groups could be useful. And I would like to support that very strongly. So I have a feeling that there is a kind of agreement, at least from some of the people around the table, that it would be a very useful thing to do something in the RDA about research evaluation. And I tend to agree with that. Otherwise, I don't think we would have begun this BoF. And I had just one slide to trigger the discussion, but the discussion already happened. So it's more about the possible content of a group. I saw some of it going through the chat, but maybe not all of them. Information gathering. This is why we began this big document, which is called Stories and Links. One of the RDA game is exchange of good practices and identification of relevant RDA groups on their relevant activities and product, and contribution eventually on the evaluation aspects. And I don't want, Serge, I think it's not a good time to begin a discussion about quantitative and qualitative evaluation, but it is somewhere, and I tend to agree with you on that, and so on. So I think that there is lots of possible work for a group, and maybe additional things to add. So if you have ideas, you can write them in the document or in the chat. We can bring additional topics, but if there is a good momentum to create something, this means we need people to manage it. So this is in general the key point and not the easiest one. So this is why there is a table at the end of a shared note. If you are interested by the subject and you agree to try to help organize it in the RDA, you can show up in the table. There is the first column is I am interested and I want to be made aware of what is going on. And the second one is a stronger commitment about I am interested and I am interested in helping to organize the activities. So as you know, it takes time to define a group in the RDA, but one of the first things is to find people to manage it. So we are not many here. I have begun to create a community group in WOVA about evaluation of research, but not many people joined it. And I think I will post a link to this table in WOVA so that interested people who could not participate in the meeting can have a look and sign up. So I see that there are people showing up. That's good. I will put my name also, but when it's over, when the meeting is over. So it's a BoF. So the BoF is to see if things can happen. And I have a feeling that they can eventually happen. Do you have things to add? You have seen that in what Sherifa was saying, there is a long list of what RDA brings to the community to help them to participate, to understand they participate fully in open science and to help them participate still better to open science. So I think it is another thing we could try to record at some point, to have on the RDA side, how we contribute to good practices in open science, which is at the core of the activity, but maybe it could be good to have a summary about that. I'm not completely sure there is an existing summary about it. So this would be to add. Javier?
Well, a couple of things maybe from my side. I think that from the Commission, I would be personally be interested in helping, fostering debate within RDA. So in whichever form you think it's more adequate, I would of course need to double check with my colleagues because we are already into so many things that we have to make sure that we can actually commit to it. But yeah, we are very interested. For us, building bridges with community-driven organizations, thinking about these things is very important because, as said before, this is a cultural change and the community itself has to create it, adopt it, and believe in it. So for us, it's important. And now, another comment is when I look at the list of topics covering all the RDA groups and interest groups, in my opinion, most of them contribute directly or indirectly for better evaluation practices. I don't know, someone that is thinking about persistent identifiers, how to better, how to verify them, etc., etc. Okay, that is that is an important contribution for future new criteria that would be developed for, as Sherifa was saying, for recognition and awarding, etc., etc. So I see it as a very horizontal topic that one could benefit. So the whole reform movement and the co-creation process about the new criteria and new tools, how should we do it? I think that yeah, it's very horizontal and it could profit from the many different list of activities taking place in RDA. So in that sense, having a good coordination of a good mapping out of how can we take all the elements that are being discussed within RDA, how can we bring them into the discussion at times? So that coordination role, I don't know exactly what is the best way of articulating it, but that could be very useful and important to advance in the reform and in the discussion, I think.
Thank you very much, Javier. I think it goes in the direction we see building up from what happens in this session. And I see Stephanie is making a very clever comment that it could be good to connect with early career researchers because there is an interest group which I think is currently active, and so it could be good to try to have eventually a common webinar or something like that in which they could discuss in particular with Sherifa and also around this to see how I feel about how RDA can help the people Sherifa and the Harbinger team has identified. So I think it could be good to take an action to try to organize something. Ari?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I completely agree that this is very much, it goes through almost all activities in RDA. And I think that we possibly just have to, the first task, what I would see if we build an interest group, would be really just to collect basically information what we already have, and to see where the gaps are, or well, what we can provide already, and where the gaps really are, and what have we actually agreed. And of course, the agreement in somewhere is not maybe a global agreement in everywhere, and to see which are really the crucial parts. And I think that this connection then to this European level collaboration is then necessary, and we can build this bridge. And of course, RDA Europe is a member of that member, but at least we signed into here, so we can of course work as a liaison towards them in this aspect.
And I think that one of the important points, because we are in RDA, is that there is a global reach. And so it's important we had colleagues from South America, because I know in South America, this is also a hot topic, evaluation of research. And I think it will be, there are colleagues from Australia also around the table. And I think it would be good to try to see in other regions of the world if this is one aspect which could be developed in the RDA with complementary inputs about what happens elsewhere, that we can gather because RDA has this global reach. Carlos.
Just some data additionally, maybe we can use the Science and Innovation Policy Evaluation repository of the Manchester University. They have a they have a repository in which you can see the evaluations around the world, even in Latin America. So, for example, Brazil have 31 evaluations, Chile, well, 16. Well, you can see, and maybe it would be a good point to start. Where are the main spaces that RDA can contribute? For example, if I go to that kind of repository, I cannot see the database that evaluators create to evaluate each science and innovation policy. So Research Data Alliance maybe can contribute a lot around the world to putting into a space all this database that are the evidence of science and innovation policy evaluations. Right now, we don't have a space to know, for example, in Costa Rica or around the world, I don't have a space to put the database that I show you in an open science space. So maybe it would be a good point to start in RDA.
Yes, RDA is in general not providing this kind of infrastructure, so we have to check. But can you put the link to what you are describing to this repository? Can you put it in the links and story document, please?
Yeah, perfect.
So I think that we are beginning to get closer to the end of this session. We have to thank all the speakers, and I think that there is a momentum to go somewhere, at least to begin to go somewhere from the BoF, which is good. I have a feeling that it would be good to connect with the early career, as I said, as it was said, and please put all the links you have and in the stories and link document. It's really here on purpose so that we keep track of relevant links to relevant information, repositories, and policies. So it's here for you to use. Maybe it's time, if you wish to show yourself, to put your camera on, if you feel about it, because we are going to the end of this meeting. And I think we can thank everybody and for participating. And as you have understood, I hope, we count on you to go further. As usual in the RDA is not doing the job, but RDA community, the RDA people are doing the job. So we count on you to do the job, as usual. So we will keep in touch. If you want to be in touch with what happens, please make sure you put your email in the document, in the shared notes, so that we know we can contact you again on the topic. And then it's 25. Can we say we give you 5 more minutes of free time? Maybe the people who are very late at night may like to go to bed at some point. So thank you very much, in particular for those who are very late at night. There are several around the table. Thank you very, very much. And if you are on the spot, so yes, if you are in Seoul, Nathalie, Rosie, and Ari are there also. So I'm sure you can meet, you can put a meeting point in WOVA, and maybe some of you will have the luck to meet in person and to continue the discussion. So if you are in Seoul, if some of you are in Seoul, feel free to contact Ari, Nathalie, and Rosie, who are really on the spot. And as you see, they are willing to make this go on in the near future. So I have a feeling many of you are home or in your office, but maybe some of you are in Seoul anyway. So bye-bye. And I hope it's only the first time we meet on the subject in the RDA. Ciao.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. And goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye-bye. See you.
Francois, can you stop the
Nathalie?
recording?
Yes, I need to find where. Arrêter l'enregistrement. Yes.
Yeah,